Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. I was awake at 2 a.m. not because of insomnia, but because of the sound no one wants. The phone vibrating like it had a pulse. I thought it was spam until I noticed the blocked number and the way my name came out of a stranger's mouth. Steady. Careful. Official. The officer said my wife had been found unconscious in a motel off I-95 and was being transported to St. Luke's. He said she was stable. He said the word stable 3 times, like I was a ladder missing a rung. The drive was a long corridor of empty lanes and silent streetlights. I remember every red light turned green as I reached it, like the city wanted me to arrive quickly. I parked crooked, jogged through the sliding doors, and hit air so cold it made my eyes water. Nurses moved through the hall with the smooth rhythm of people who know how the night breathes. A security guard pointed me toward room 12, where a curtain whispered in the air conditioning. She lay there with an IV in her arm, a bruise on her shoulder like a smudge of storm, and the same face I'd kissed goodbye 12 hours earlier before my shift. I felt 2 things at once: relief that she was breathing, and a strange, hollow space where relief should have landed. The attending physician told me they suspected dehydration and alcohol, nothing life-threatening. She would wake soon. He said I could sit with her. He left, and the room remembered how to be quiet. Her phone was on the tray table, bright with missed calls. I had never opened it before. Trust was a door we both left unlocked. I reached for it because I needed a number for her mother. That's what I told myself. The phone opened with her Face ID. She stirred and the screen bloomed, welcoming me like it had been waiting. The first message thread at the top had a contact name that wasn't a name, just a single emoji of a dumbbell. The last text was a pin of the motel's location, sent an hour earlier. Above it were photos from over the past month: gym mirrors, sweaty smiles, a hand on a shoulder that wasn't mine. None of it was explicit, but intimacy doesn't have to be, it just has to be private. There were messages about workouts that turned into late-night jokes, rides home that turned into, "we should talk," and then a sentence that had the gravity of a falling safe. I can't stop thinking about last time. The dumbbell wasn't a code, it was literal. Her trainer at the boutique gym, Miles, the man I picked, paid, and trusted to help her get strong after the back injury. He had a clean smile and forearms roped with effort. He'd grinned at me when I signed the membership papers, told me he'd take care of her plan, and I believed him because belief is cheaper than doubt. I scrolled and stopped because my hands were shaking. For a second, I thought about waking her up with a question mark. That's what betrayal does to you. It makes you want the person who caused the pain to help you make sense of it. Instead, I set the phone gently where I found it and sat back down. She woke up at dawn when the window turned from charcoal to ash. Her eyes focused, widened, and broke into tears I didn't know how to catch. The nurse checked her vitals, smiled, and left us to the mess. My wife, Ailey, reached for my hand and apologized without using the word. "It was a mistake," she said. She kept saying mistake like it was a pothole she hadn't seen, not a road she turned onto again and again. I asked how long. She bit her lip and said it started as encouragement, escalated to hangs after training, then crossed a line a few weeks back when she felt lost. She said it wasn't serious. She said it was confusion. She said many things that sounded like she was throwing buckets of water at a house already on fire. I nodded because there's a politeness you perform even when the world shifts. I told her to rest. I told her we'd talk later, which was true and untrue. There would be talking, but not the kind she imagined. Out in the parking lot, the air smelled like soap and wet concrete. I sat in my car and let the engine idle. I've always been a guy who fixes things: the squeaky hinge, the taxes spreadsheet, the broken cabinet door no one else hears or sees. But some problems don't want a wrench, they want a witness. I called a lawyer I knew from college, a woman who had turned debate club victories into a courtroom practice that made headlines. She answered on the second ring with a voice like sanded wood. "I'm sorry," she said after I told her. "You're going to want clarity. You won't get it from them, you'll get it from paperwork." We talked through practicalities, finances, property, communications. She advised me to stay calm, document everything, and avoid hero moves that later look like mistakes. She told me to forward the messages and photos to a locked file, then put the phone down. When I hung up, I expected to feel empowered. Instead, I felt emptier, like I'd been given careful instructions for exiting a house during a fire when I still wanted to punch the flames. Then I saw my reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes red, jaw tight, and I decided that if I couldn't fix it, I could at least choose how it ended. I drove home to shower and change. Our place looked the same, which felt almost unkind. The fridge note with a smiley face, the pair of running shoes by the door, the coffee mug she loved with a chip on the handle that never cut her. I collected paperwork the lawyer asked for and sent what needed sending. Then I left again because the walls seemed to be holding their breath. The gym sat in a renovated warehouse with big windows, a boutique logo, and a chalkboard wall with inspirational quotes that felt like fortune cookies delivered by a drill sergeant. I parked across the street and watched people go in and out with duffel bags and optimism. When the doors slid open, I could smell the warm rubber of mats and the citrus cleaner they used to pretend sweat wasn't sweat. I waited until noon when the flow slowed, and the front desk staff were swapping shifts. I walked inside and asked for a day pass. The receptionist smiled and handed me a clipboard. She didn't know me. I'd always let Allie handle check-ins. I filled out the form with neat block letters and an address that was mine, and wouldn't be for long. The room beyond the lobby was full of bodies chasing better versions of themselves. Ropes slapped the floor. Barbells clinked. A trainer shouted encouragement like a coach calling plays. Music thumped through the speakers, bass heavy enough to hide the heartbeat in my ears. And then I saw him. Miles. He was across the room teaching a client how to brace a deadlift, his hand hovering near their back without touching. He was the type whose confidence arrives before he does. He laughed with someone by the squat rack and then turned, scanning the room like a lifeguard at a crowded pool. When his eyes landed on me, I felt a current crackle between us. Recognition didn't flash. Not yet. He'd seen my face only in passing. To him, I was probably a new member, another New Year's resolution arriving in August. I didn't go straight to him. I warmed up, stretched, did a set of pull-ups while counting backward from 100. It gave me time to rehearse what I'd say, and more importantly, what I wouldn't. I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't threaten. I wouldn't give him a scene he could retell as proof that I was unhinged. I would be the quiet kind of storm that ruins a picnic without the lightning show. Ailey texted while I was chalking my hands. "Where did you go? We need to talk." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. I typed, "We will, later." I put the phone on Do Not Disturb. The lawyer's voice played in my head. Avoid hero moves. I imagined a scoreboard with 2 columns, emotion and strategy. I needed points in the second. Miles walked by, and I caught his eye. "You the owner?" I asked like a man asking for directions. "Part owner," he said, offering a hand. "Miles." I took it, held it half a second longer than normal, and nodded like I was introducing myself to a neighbor. "Evan." He asked if I needed anything. I said I was checking the place out. He smiled like the room belonged to him and returned to his client. I watched the set, the cues, the way he praised their form, and I wondered when good coaching becomes something else, when a hand near the small of your back becomes permission to forget your vows. Then I reminded myself that she chose the detour with him. He didn't steal anything. He encouraged a decision she wanted to make. I finished a set and grabbed water. The bottle shook slightly in my hand, and I pretended it was because I'd gone heavy. What I wanted to do was announce who I was and what he'd done, and watch the room tilt on its axis. What I did instead was wait. Patience is a tool most people forget they own. When his client left for the locker room, he circled back. "You lifting with a plan or winging it?" he asked, teasing in the way trainers do to sell packages without making it sound like a pitch. "Trying to get my life back in shape," I said. He laughed, not hearing the double meaning. He offered a complimentary assessment. I accepted. He led me to a small office glassed in from the floor up. Privacy without hiding. The desk had a stack of forms, a plastic skeleton with a missing finger, and a bowl of branded mints. He sat across from me with the relaxed posture of someone confident in his domain. "Any injuries?" he asked, pen ready. "Yeah," I said. "One big one." He smiled politely, waiting for me to describe a shoulder or knee. I slid a glossy photo across the desk, one I'd printed at home that morning, one of those gym selfies of him and Allie. Nothing indecent, just close. just happy in a way that stung. His pen froze. His eyes tracked from the photo to my face, and I saw the moment recognition clicked into place like a seatbelt. He didn't flinch. Credit to him. He looked at the picture, then looked out at the floor where clients were grunting through sets, and then back at me. "We should talk somewhere else," he said evenly. "We'll talk right here," I replied, matching his calm. The office glass turned our conversation into a silent movie for anyone glancing over. 2 men sitting, 2 cups of water sweating on a desk, a bowl of mints between them like a referee. "I'm not here to make a scene," I said. "I'm here to end one." He swallowed and placed the pen down carefully, like he was disarming himself. "I didn't mean, I don't care what you meant," I said, still even. "I care what you did." Outside, someone dropped a bumper plate, and the sound echoed like a gavel. I leaned back and let the silence fill the room just enough to make him shift in his chair. The day had started with a phone call. Now it would become something else, something deliberate. My hands stopped shaking. I had a plan, and it began with the next sentence. Miles leaned back in his chair, shoulders tense but his face carefully neutral. He was the type of man who knew how to keep his expression under control, the kind of calm that made him good at his job, motivating, steady, confident. But under that calm I could see the flicker of realization. He knew exactly who I was now. "I didn't expect you here," he finally said. "I didn't expect to be here either," I answered, my voice even. Yet here we are. The office felt like a fishbowl. People outside lifted weights, laughed with friends, took selfies in mirrors, completely unaware of the storm happening in this little glass room. The irony wasn't lost on me. Out there, everyone was focused on building muscle and strength. In here, I was tearing apart the illusion of loyalty and trust. Miles shifted, then leaned forward. "Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend this looks good. It doesn't. But it wasn't." "Don't," I cut in. "Don't try to make it sound smaller than it is. You knew she was married. You knew she was my wife, and you still did it." He exhaled slowly, tapping his fingers on the desk. "She came to me, Evan. I didn't force anything. I didn't chase her down. I didn't plan this." I stared at him, measuring each word. "You're right. She made choices too. But you were the professional, the one I trusted with her. She was vulnerable, and you crossed a line you knew was there." For a long moment, silence sat between us. The gym's music thumped through the glass, something upbeat, something about motivation and never giving up. It was almost comical. "I already called a lawyer," I said finally. His eyes flickered. "I'm not here to throw punches or scream. I'm here to let you know that I see you for what you are, and I'm not going to let this slide." Miles's jaw flexed, but he didn't argue. He just nodded once, like a man who knew there was no defense that would sound convincing enough. I stood up, leaving the photo on the desk. "Keep it," I told him, "a reminder of what you threw away for a cheap thrill." And I walked out. That should have been the end. But life doesn't tie itself up neatly after a single confrontation. The days that followed were full of paperwork, long calls with my lawyer, and conversations with Allie that circled in exhausting loops. She begged, she cried, she apologized. She promised it was over. She promised it meant nothing. But every time she spoke, all I could hear were those late-night messages, those inside jokes, the photos with smiles that weren't for me. I started sleeping in the guest room. The house felt like a museum of memories I no longer trusted. Every framed photo looked like a lie. Every object carried weight, the mug she used each morning, the sweatshirt draped over a chair. I'd sit there at night staring at the ceiling, wondering how many signs I had ignored, how many moments I had mistaken for love when they were already slipping away. But revenge, real revenge, doesn't come from screaming or breaking things. It comes from control. Calm, deliberate, calculated steps. That's what my lawyer reminded me of every time we spoke. "Don't give her or him any ammunition," she said. "Stay steady, stay smart. Let them unravel while you keep moving forward." So that's what I did. I gathered financial documents, set up separate accounts, made copies of everything that mattered. I logged dates, saved messages, created a trail so clear it couldn't be twisted. Each action was like stacking bricks on my side of the wall, preparing for the inevitable split. And all the while I kept going back to that gym, not every day, but enough. Enough for Miles to see me there, lifting, running, training. I didn't say a word to him after that first confrontation. I didn't need to. My presence was enough. Every time our eyes met across the floor, he knew I was there, not as a broken husband, but as someone rebuilding in plain sight. The funny thing is, I actually did start to change. The gym became my outlet, my therapy. The anger that had once felt like it would swallow me whole got burned off rep by rep, mile by mile. My body grew stronger, and with it, my mind steadied. One afternoon, as I was finishing a set, Miles walked past and muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "You're not going to break me." I wiped sweat from my face, met his eyes, and smiled. "I don't have to," I said. "You already broke yourself." He froze, his mask cracking for the briefest second, and that was enough. Meanwhile, Ailey watched me slip further away. She tried dinners, notes, soft touches, but I didn't bend. I was polite, even kind, but I was no longer hers. She could sense it, the way my silence said more than any argument could. One night she whispered through tears, "Please don't leave me. Please. We can fix this." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the woman I had married, but the choices she had made. I thought about the word mistake, how easily she'd thrown it out like it could erase everything. And I realized the cruelest revenge wasn't shouting or public shaming. It was simple. It was walking away stronger than before, leaving her with the wreckage she created. I didn't answer her right then. I just stood, went to the guest room and closed the door. The sound of it latching was louder than any fight we could have had, because the real storm wasn't me. It was the silence I left behind. The days turned into weeks, and each one carried me farther from the man who had once lived for her smile. Distance has a strange way of clarifying things. At first I thought revenge meant confronting Miles, humiliating him, or making Ailey feel the same pain she had given me. But the longer I sat with the silence, the more I realized revenge isn't always about destruction. It can be about transformation. Allie tried to stitch the cracks back together with promises. She suggested counseling, vacations, a fresh start. But every word sounded like paint over rotting wood. You can't repair trust once it's burned down to ash. The only thing left to do is sweep the floor clean. My lawyer kept me grounded. She guided me through the divorce filings with precision, showing me how to protect what mattered and walk away with dignity. "This is your clean slate," she told me one afternoon. "Don't waste energy on anger. Invest it in what comes next." I took her advice. At work, I poured myself into projects I had been too distracted to care about before. My colleagues noticed. Promotions that had once seemed out of reach began to feel possible. I wasn't dragging around the dead weight of suspicion anymore. I was lighter, sharper, focused. At the gym, I built something new. Not just muscle, but discipline. I pushed myself past limits I didn't know I had. Each time I loaded more plates onto the barbell, I felt like I was reclaiming pieces of myself that had been stolen by lies. And every time Miles saw me there, steady and unbroken, it was its own quiet kind of revenge. He couldn't rattle me, couldn't intimidate me. The affair had been his victory, but my survival, my growth, was the war he couldn't win. He avoided me now. He'd nod politely if we crossed paths, but the easy confidence he once carried seemed thinner. I didn't need to call him out, because he carried the guilt like a shadow that followed him everywhere. I let him keep it. The final confrontation came not with Miles, but with Allie. We sat across from each other at our dining table, the same table where we'd celebrated anniversaries, birthdays, and quiet dinners after long days. Now it was covered with papers, divorce agreements, settlement terms, signatures waiting for ink. She looked at me with eyes red from crying. "Evan, I made a mistake. I've said it 100 times, but I still love you. Doesn't that count for anything?" I studied her, feeling the weight of years shared together, the laughter, the inside jokes, the plans we once drew out on napkins. But I also felt the cold sting of motel rooms, hidden texts, and the word mistake tossed around like a bandage for a wound that never closed. "No," I said finally, my voice calm but firm. "It doesn't, because love without respect isn't love at all. It's just convenience, and I deserve more than that." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I didn't flinch. I signed my name at the bottom of the page, slid the pen across to her, and stood up. That was the moment I realized true revenge wasn't about hurting her. It was about choosing myself. Life after the papers were filed was different, but not empty. Friends reached out, pulling me into circles I'd neglected. I discovered hobbies I'd forgotten, reading late into the night, hiking trails that reminded me how small problems look compared to mountains. I even started volunteering at a local youth center, teaching kids how to lift weights safely. Funny how the very place where betrayal was born became the place where I rebuilt not just myself, but others too. Months later, I walked past the old gym. Through the glass, I saw Miles still training clients, barking encouragement, playing the role. Our eyes met briefly. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, didn't feel hurt. I felt nothing. And nothing is powerful. Nothing means he no longer had a hold on me. I walked on, head high, the air fresh with possibility. Because revenge, I learned, isn't fire and fury. It's not shouting, not fists, not scandals. Real revenge is peace. Real revenge is living a life so full, so strong, so untouchable, that the people who tried to break you are forced to watch you thrive without them. That night, I sat on my porch, sipping coffee, watching the sky shift from gold to deep blue. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt steady. I had walked through betrayal, through anger, through loss. And I had come out on the other side, not just alive, but stronger. My story hadn't ended in that motel, or in that hospital room, or even in that glass-walled office at the gym. My story began the moment I chose not to let betrayal define me. And as the stars blinked awake overhead, I realized something. Sometimes the best revenge isn't walking into someone else's gym. It's building one of your own, inside yourself, brick by brick, rep by rep, until you're unshakable. Until you've become everything they thought you couldn't be, without them.